A warm greeting and thanks to all the people present. A big thank you to the speakers for their research work on the topic of today's meeting. I also bring you the greetings of the Rector's delegate, Professor Nicoletta Vasta, who, despite her great interest in the topic, could not be present. I am truly happy about this opportunity for colleagues to meet and reread the beginning of the greatest change that several generations have ever known. Many scholars argue that communication has overtaken or replaced several areas and contexts in politics, in education, in socialization, in the definition of reality. The following quote thus becomes spontaneous also. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, the Word. From him all things were made. Without the Word, in nothing was made that has been made. John describes in the Bible, where a word stands for logos, with the meaning of creative word, ordering wisdom, light, and life. Leaving aside aspect of faith, there is still a hint of irrationality, even in the description of some of the zero cases. There were reports from the same press that credited the zero cases, that perhaps there were precedents, but nevertheless, the version most covered by the media, at least in Italy, was the one most narratable, with clarity and detail, even to subsequent contrary information. At least two principles have thus emerged. The first, of non-contradictory media. The second, a symbol. Patient zero is a symbol, and the symbol is believed in emotionally rather than rationally. Now, I leave the word about this aspect of my dear colleagues, and in alphabetical order or country. Now I'll leave the word to Croatia with Ivana Schiedelfeld. Please.
Yes. Hello, good day everyone once again, and thank you for inviting me and Damir to participate in today's webinar on this very interesting topic. I will present today our short research since Damir is not here now. I told you a few minutes ago why. He asked me to join on this case by end of May, since we are having a reaccreditation in our university. So we have a really short time to realize this survey or research. All the research, even the media one regarding coronavirus, is quite fresh, and it will for sure take time to complete the whole story about COVID-19. So we did a media research on selected portals in Croatia, analyzing the first published article about the patient zero in Croatia, and after that all the headlines that concern only the patient zero during 1 month. So our today's presentation is divided into 4 parts. In the first part, we'll give you a short context of COVID in Croatia. Then we'll take a look at the aim, methods, and the sample of the research. Also, I will present you the results of our short research and give you a conclusion about this topic in Croatia. Do you all see the presentation? There's no problem with it?
Sure. Yes, we do.
Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic has aroused a huge interest in media space of Republic Croatia. It is only comparable with the largest international sporting events as a football or our homeland war in 19th. So the coronavirus pandemic spread in Croatia on February 25th in 2020, last year. The first case was confirmed in Zagreb. A 25-year-old man was in Milan for the Atalanta-Valencia football game. It was from February 19 to February 21st, and he was first infected person in Croatia. So since then, when the first case of infection was recorded in Croatia, until May this year, there's a total around 360,000 people infected with the new virus since the new virus were recorded, of whom around a little bit more than 8,000 people in Croatia died from coronavirus. To that date, a total of approximately 2 million people, a bit more, have been tested, and slightly less than 1.5 million people have been vaccinated with the first dose of vaccine in Croatia. So given the lack of time, I will not talk so much about the context in Croatia, because it is very similar to every state in Europe. We're currently at the end of the third wave. So regarding the research on how the media portrayed the patient zero, we choose to analyze the 10 most read Croatian portals in the period from 25th February, so when the patient zero was confirmed, and during 1 month later, when all publications about the patient zero decreased sharply after he left hospital. So we choose the headline analysis for a very practical reason. The first article about the first patient was transmitted by Croatian Institute for Public Health after the press conference of the Civil Protection Headquarters of the Republic of Croatia, and identical news was transmitted by all selected portals. So the first news about patient zero was completely transmitted. All the media transmitted that news. However, the headlines were a bit different on portals, which is why we choose it as a unit or as a sample to analyze. We also analyzed the text which was transmitted to the media, the first text, including selected portals. So because analysis of that text has determined the first tone of the media representation of the patient zero. That text was surprisingly very informative. It was a short article report. There was only information without an attitude or a comments of the journalist. The title derives from the text. The title does not overestimate the content of the text. There is no court of journalists in either the title or the text. I mean, in the headline or the text. The typo of headline was very informative, as the type of the text too. Balanced, does not convey hate speech, does not condemn, does not blame patient zero for getting infection, does not encourage panic, and relates recommendations and instructions about COVID-19 measures. So the value of orientation of the headline was very neutral. The method of reporting and the equipment of the text, photographs, do not reveal the journalist's position on the one being reported about patient zero. The text relieves the following elements of the patient zero's identity. They said about his gender, his age, where he came from, and where he became infected, and the hospital, the name of the hospital where he was hospitalized, and there were no symptoms listed in the text. So I will present you now the short results of the research according to the created metrics, and they are as follows. We analyzed a total 57 headlines of the 10 portals in Croatia during 1 month. The headlines were just about patient zero. As for the information and attitudes in headline itself, 75% of the headlines were only information, while 15% of headlines There is an attitude and journalist comments. They're visible along with information. There is no court or judgment of a journalist in any of the headlines. The type of headlines are more informative, while 35% headlines were written very sensationalistic and as a clickbait, while 11% of them were most critical, especially one portal, 7dnevno portal in Croatia. The value orientation of the headlines was 90% neutral. You couldn't see or negative or positive reporting cannot be recognized in relation to the patient zero, while 10% of them are positive in sense that they do not condemn patient zero for his infection, because there is only a matter of time who will be the patient zero. We were expecting patient zero in Croatia, so it wasn't a shock. Also, no headline is condemning in the sense that attacks, criticize, or marginalize the patient zero. There is only 2 headlines presented an opinion or attitude about the patient zero in the sense that he was careless and that's why he got infected. In the way of reporting, 86% of headlines were neutral, while 8 of them were analyzed headline goes in favor of the patient zero in the sense that it justifies him. Also, in this research, we try to find out which elements of his identity are relieved by the analyzed headlines. Most of them say that it is a man who works in a technology company, 72%, that he's from Zagreb, 26%, and that he's 25 years old. Just 18% of the titles list the symptoms he had when he was infected, and almost 50% reveal where he became infected. As I said in the start, it was in Milan at the football match. 20% of headlines state his condition and saying that his form of coronavirus is very mild. We also analyzed the letters used in headlines because usually letters can signify sensationalism or panic or the announcement of breaking news. So no single headline was capitalized, while in combination there were as many as 71% mixed, so lowercase and uppercase letters in the headlines, and 21% title headlines were written lowercase. As for the symptoms, at that time, the most people were interested in how corona affects the body of the infected and how the corona infection can be recognized. And with this relatively small percentage of not even 20%, it can be interpreted as protecting patients' privacy and insufficient research on all coronavirus symptoms. The headlines state that the patient zero had a mild fever, that he had a headache, he had also general weakness and tiredness. In addition, part of the title reveals that he had a mild form of corona. The same day, his twin brother also was tested and infected, so he was the second infected person, his twin brother, and he was placed in the same room at the hospital with his brother. His girlfriend, who was with him at the football match in Milan, was positive after the 3rd test, so part of the headlines applies to her as well. In just 2 headlines, it is evident that the journalist was talking or relying on a conversation with the mother of the infected patient, who is in a state of shock. And it was the only headline who used the word shock. So in August, almost 5 months later, the patient zero himself revealed his identity, and as a reason why he's doing now, months after, he stated that he was very afraid of condemnation and marginalization, that he was very mentally ill and in fear. That's why he wanted to kind of save his privacy from the news. He didn't want his name in the media, and media really respected that. That interview was done by a TV station in Croatia with a very positive tone of reporting, non-judgmental, not critical, and at that situation, it was end of the summer in Croatia, and the numbers were falling down, and it was a time when everyone was mostly familiar with the virus, and certainly contributed to that. So, as a short conclusion about this, our short research. How can we conclude the Croatian media reporting about the patient zero in portals? The headlines were mostly neutral, informative, and very objective. They were not panicking or judgmental. The privacy, which is very important, of a patient zero was respected till the time he himself wanted to release his name in an interview. The media mostly broadcast the same content because there was not much information then, and in relation to the number of announcements about the patient zero, all the contents in the media was mostly diametrically opposite. So all other news about COVID in Croatia was panicky, sensationalistic, with unverified facts, with a lot of fake news, with the various instructions, conspiracy theories, and other similar to that. So that case, when we're researching about the patient zero, the media narrative and the media in whole, we were surprised that they did the media representation about patient zero, this neutral and objective without sensationalism, but the all other news during the whole last year was extremely panicky and with a lot of fake news in Croatia. So I hope I was in time. I didn't use.
Yes. Thank you for the perfect respect of the time. I was helping another people to connect on our conference. I can say hello. There is another college, Manuela Farinosi. She studied the internet movement in the social network, international, with many big international reality, and we have some professional communicator as Camilla Manzato. Welcome today. Thank you, Ivana, for the presentation, detailed and clear content. But I hope the questions and debate after all the presentation. Perfect. All together. Now, always in alphabetical order, the word to Claudio Melchior, Italy, University of Udine.
Hi to everyone. First of all, I want to apologize for my poor English because I don't use it so much in Italy, and I need a lot of time to come back to my original skills that are not so big. So my point, let's go to the topic. My point is to tell you in some way a story that is the story of corona outspread looked for the point of view of Italy, and in particular media, okay, our media. I don't know if you remember, we are speaking more than 1 year later. In January 2020, newspapers from all the Western countries begins to fill up with news about a new disease that would be born in China. Okay, the first phase of this narrative in Italy was dedicated to 3 topics in particular. The first one was the hypothesis on the origin of the disease. Okay, they spoke about some animals, bats eating in some area of China and so on, things like those. This is the first topic, the origin of the disease. The second one, the second topic of our media was dedicated to China, and in particular to initiatives, actions that in China were put in place to counter the virus. And our media was concerned on the point that those actions were not entirely democratic and liberal from our point of view. So the first argument, the origin. The second argument, the way in which China is counteracting the virus. And the third one was the importance of not discriminating against the Chinese present in Italy, present in our country. Okay, these were the three topics at the beginning of the story in Italy. At a certain point, everything changes. Despite the blocks in air movements and other kind of initiatives about moving people in the world, the disease was narrated as moving to Europe. Okay, case zero of all the countries outside China was described as a German entrepreneur. He was started from the region of Wuhan, okay, from China. He has returned it to Europe, and then our media says in Europe he had infected 2 other people, a colleague and another people, and so on. And we have at the beginning of the story a chain, a traceable chain, very precise, very specific of cases. So you can find the person 1, and then the person 2, and then the person 3. This leads to the declaration, very briefly, in a very brief time, of the first official European dead person of COVID. And that person was a German one. Okay, the first official dead in Europe is in Germany. After a few days, we have the second official death, and in this case in France. So the first one had been in Germany, the second one in France. A few days later again, we have the first death in Italy. But when it happened, everything in the media, in the international media, has changed. Because in reality, in Italy, we don't have a case zero. The Croatian colleague have told us about the case zero in Croatia, and it was a person who came from Milan. Okay, in Italy we don't have a real case zero because the announcement of the first person who was dead in Italy was just before the declaration that in Italy the disease was already spread. Because just a few days after the first death, we have in Italy some outbreaks, okay, some focus of the virus in some little towns near Bergamo in the north of Italy, and small localities, okay, which were being physically isolated in a very tight and military way in order to stop the diffusion of virus. The story continues in this way for not so many days. Okay. Then it was recognized that the spread of the virus in Italy was wider than those specific outbreaks and towns, and the Italian premier, Conte, our prime minister, becomes the first leader outside China to declare the spread of the COVID in his nation and the need to start the lockdown. The Italian lockdown was the first one outside China. The next day, the day just after the declaration on our premiere, Germany closed its borders without any official declaration. This is the first action of Germany, close the borders. And on the evening of the same day, Macron from France announcing to the French that France was also in lockdown, starting from midnight. The result of this story, that in my opinion is full of contradictions, the result of this story was that international media and social networks and newspapers and everyone in Western countries start to speak about a map of the spread of COVID made in this way. You have the starting point from China, then you have an arrow that goes to Italy, and then from Italy, a lot of arrows in all the rest of the world. The idea was that the virus had passed through Italy. In Italy, we have lost the control of the spreading of the virus, so as to create the cascade problem, also for Germany, also for France, also for Croatia, as we have just listened, and then to all the other countries in the world. Why I say that, in my opinion, this story is full of contradictions? Because now we know a little bit more about COVID. We have learned several things about this virus. The first and most important for me is that fortunately the disease does nothing to most of the people. To most of the people, it does not create particular symptoms. And in many cases, people transmit it without even realizing that they have taken it. So my point is, this means that in order to have the first person with strong symptoms, or in order to have the first dead person, you must have already hundreds or thousands of people who have already contracted the virus without symptoms. These are our data, okay, official data. They tell us that a lot of people have taken the virus. A little part of them have had symptoms, and fortunately, a little part of them, okay, we can speak about casualties and that person. But if you think to this situation, to the fact that you need to have a lot of people with the virus to have the symptoms, and you have to have thousands and thousands of people with virus in order to have the first person who dies, for the virus, it means that it's quite difficult to think that in Germany, for example, in Germany, they have had the first dead person. But in my opinion, this means that in the moment in which Germany have had the first person who is died, I'm quite sure that in Germany, the virus was spread in a significant way from a numeric point of view. Because if not, it's impossible to think with the knowledge that we have now about COVID, that you can go and arrive to a casualty. The second dead person was in France. And we can say the same thing about dead countries. But I want to remind you that when Germany have had the first dead person, they do anything to counter the virus. When in France they have the first dead person, they did anything to counter the virus. Italy was the first place in which, just after the first death, we have started with lockdown, and then all the world followed in some way our situation. Why? What is the reason for which I wanted to tell you this story? Because I think that there's a lot of contradictions in the way in which media have narrated this story. And in particular, the idea that the virus was in some way that you can control this virus was an idea completely false in some way. And it's quite unbelievable to think that it was Italy to spread the virus all over the world. Because just starting from the point of the story, Italian people was blocked in some way. All the other countries started to block us. So just from the beginning, for Italian people was impossible to travel to other countries. Italy has no close its borders until now, but the other country did it. So what I must say to make a stop to this narration, I think that truth doesn't exist, and so every kind of narrative from media is naturally a narrative that can't be completely true from all points of view. But the problem is that if we want to understand better what is true and what is false in our media narratives, we have to start to focus on contradictions, because if not, in order to say that part of the narrative is false, I need to know the truth, okay? And in my opinion, it's impossible to have the truth. But when media say that one thing is white, and then the same media say that one thing is black, okay, if you put the things together, you must be sure that one of the two things are not completely true. And this is the way in which I look to this media in order to understand something more about it. I think that the contradictions in the institutional information in Italy have been many. And I want to conclude saying one thing. Our institutional speakers and our media have told us that in Italy we have had something like more than 100,000 of casualties linked to COVID. But if you go to the official data about casualties in Italy, you find that in 2020, they say that we had 50,000 persons more than 2019. 50,000 is a lot of people. I don't want to underestimate this data. But the fact that the fact is that 50,000 is half of more than 100,000 persons. And you can find another contradiction in our media. And a lot of other contradictions are findable in a very easy way if we look with this kind of mental focus about the narrative of media. I conclude only one thing. Our colleague from Croatia have pointed out the way about sensationalism and in order to stop panic, okay, of Croatian media in speaking about virus in the first beginning of the problem. It's quite easy to say that in Italy we have had a very panically communication and with a lot of sensationalistics. It's impossible for me to say this word now. Okay, news and titles in our media. And this is not the best way probably to counteract to an emergency, because my studies about emergency communication told me that the first thing that you have to do when you have to act against an emergency is to avoid the panic of people. On the contrary, our media have in some way made the contrary. They started to spread fear in population in order to have the possibility that people follow the lockdown and all the instructions and so on. But in my opinion, this is not the right way to counteract an emergency. So, sorry for my English again. I hope that in some way it was intelligible. Okay, I have to start to to make this, and I came back to Nicola.
Okay, don't worry, my English make beautiful your English.
Okay, it's a big war between us, yes.
Yes, no, thank you very much. And now the word to the trigger of these events. We remember your beautiful conference about the fake news, I think 2 months ago, but now the word to Poland, Ursula Soler from John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin, and Mariusz Buzilo from the Polish Chamber of Informatics and Telecommunication. Please, you're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Nicola, you took everything from me because I wanted to present us, but you did my job. So thank you very much. We would like to talk about media narratives in Poland at the beginning of the coronavirus epidemic in Poland, in the context also of Italian case, just to compare our different realities to see how they work together. At the beginning, I would like to give the voice to my colleague Mariusz. He will start and I will continue. Thank you.
Thank you. So I first would like to make sure whether the presentation is clearly seen. Do you see it, please?
Yes.
And the slides change? Yeah, okay. So, yes. So what have we researched? This was also very quick research we did. We tried to find the earliest information in the online media and also in the paper media about coronavirus, and we wanted to check whether these information were in line with what European Center for Disease Prevention and Control has reported. So we first checked the timeline of ECDC, you will see it. Then we gathered the earliest Polish online sources that was up to the first quarter 2020. And we also focused on what is in the context, we especially focused on Italy. When did the information about Italy appeared in the media reports in Poland? And the first problems we have had looking for the information was that a lot of online media information had no dates of publications, and either on or the dates of the updates of the publications. Sometimes the update was there was an information about update, but there was nothing to tell what was updated. So, for example, we had to cross different sources of information just to say that the Italy clue, for example, was set in March, not in January. Nevertheless, we found the trace in January article, which was updated in March on the issue. So the first reports were indeed in Poland connected with the end day of the year 2019. That was when the first official report by Wuhan Municipal Health Commissioner to WHO was done, and Deutsche Welle, the portal which has the Polish edition, said that was the first news we have found about unknown sickness in China. That was just general information about the 27 people are sick in Wuhan, Hubei, and patients are isolated. No judgment, no, just a short information, and it was not specifically distributed further, except of this Deutsche Welle Polish edition. So indeed the information in Poland hit after the New Year's break. It was indeed the 15th of January when MedExpert, which is a portal which focuses on medical information, was also basing on the first risk assessment done by ECDC, which was on 9th on January. So, and that was only one information, the first, just saying that it's quite a virus that has been found in China, that it can transmit between humans. That was something new, and nothing more in the information, nothing showing that there are any risk to the Europe, for example. 17th of January, there was a second risk assessment made by European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. It was focusing on the China risk, and also nothing was about Europe still. And Deutsche Welle on 19th of January said something more, that there are around 1,700 cases, 62 are confirmed. So there were more information about the virus in the mid of January, but it was still not, it didn't hit the public indeed. So the first information about Europe was in 22nd of January. It was the third risk assessment of ECDC, and there were medical portal who made an information basing on this risk assessment, saying that it is official that people who visited China should should contact some medical advice and to check if they have any fever or cold or any visible fear or of the infection. Yes, so that was the information, the first information and the first official information in Poland. Which was later distributed further, also in medical portals, saying that the first 2 cases have been confirmed in France. So that was via Reuters, and it was on the 24th of January. And on the 26th of January, indeed, there was the 4th risk assessment made by the ECDC, which confirmed this France identification. So our medical portal had this information 2 days before official risk assessment from ECDC. As January ends, the mainstream has started to notice the virus. So 27th of January, it was Gazeta Wyborcza, which is a large media group, said that made an article about coronavirus, of course, in the China context, and saying it had killed 80 people so far. And the very same day or the day after, there was the first news about case confirmed in Germany. So I was the man in Starnberg in Bayern who was diagnosed on 27th of January, and next 3 cases has also been confirmed in Bayern. And that was maybe the mainstream has started to notice that, because it was coming closer to Poland, it was first France, then second was Germany. So there started to be more information about coronavirus, but of informative way. What is this? What does it mean? So first general health portals, later on some portals connected with media, television group, but focusing on health. So saying about symptoms, saying about how you should protect yourself, but no danger to Poland still was specified. What's interesting, on 7th of February, there was accepted first scientific article in scientific journal, coronavirus, the novel virus, and it was quite well covered. The article was accepted on 24th of January 2020. So it looks like Polish scientists in medical has quite well covered and watched the development of the virus, but it was not reflected yet in the media, in the general media. And indeed, we have the 28th January 2020, when there was a large information that Europe takes action. And what was the action? The action was that EU civil protection mechanism activated the repatriation of the EU citizens. It was focused only on the planes who were specially designated to take citizens, European citizens from China to European countries. And it was quite well covered in Polish media that the Polish citizens will come to Poland from China via France. So, but also it was not connected with the danger, but saying that this mechanism has started. And what is interesting, very similar, very shortly, there is the 5th risk assessment of ECDC, 31st of January, saying there is moderate to high likelihood of additional imported cases in the European Union and the EEA. Yeah? Previously, there was no risk or very low risk of such imports. So it started at the end of January, officially be reported by ECDC. Polish ministers said at the same time that the bigger problem are flu and paraflu infections. So this is later on, it was cited many times by and using to disinform people. But he also added that influenza is much more dangerous, and 100 people who came back via this EU protection mechanism are being monitored in Poland. And also at the end of the January, there was a large article in the new tech online portal, Spider's Web, which was informing about this mechanism, but also had interesting information. First, Italy patient suspected coronavirus, and it was referring to the Chinese citizen on a cruiser ship Costa Smeralda, who was with 6,000 people and was harbored in Civitavecchi, close to Rome. And that was the only information at this time concerning Italy. And no further follow-up on this was later on in the media in a short time, I mean, within January and February. So next information was about Sweden, who joined the France, Germany, and Finland. And that was about the woman who returned from Wuhan. So again, at the end of January, we have nothing from Italy. And at the very beginning of the February, we have a news which was called of global importance from Italy, and which was heavily reflected via the Polish press agency and other media, that was saying that coronavirus was isolated in a hospital in Rome. It was the Minister of Health, Roberto Speranza, who announced this on the conference, and it was saying the news that the conference saying that the Italian healthcare is one of the best in the world, like it was cited, and that the results of the researchers will be given to the whole international community to find easier a cure and to help fight the new virus. But it was just very confirmative and positive, as you see. At the same time, it is interesting WHO comes into the play in Polish media, also via Deutsche Welle, so this is also the German portal, saying that there is an infodemic. There is too much information which either are false or true, and the information floods media. So this is what WHO said, and saying that it was very interesting for me, especially when you analyzed later on discussion on WHO. The first, it said that you should not fear to open packages from China. So it focuses on the flow of packages from China, saying also that garlic will not help, hand washing should, for example. And that was the start of WHO campaign on coronavirus, still not name sickness. So as you see, it was still optimistic. At the beginning of the February, it was still connected to China, saying that, of course, some people died, 813. It's more than SARS in 2002. But Chinese hope it's an apogeum and has been reached, and the numbers will start decreasing. So it was still comparison to the infection with flu, saying that the latter is more dangerous and deadly. It is also the first mid of February when WHO officially names the sickness caused by the virus as Covid-19, not 10, as Covid-19. That's the mistake in the presentation. So that was also interesting, because before the date it was much more difficult to research information on the virus, because it was called with different names on it, and it was coronavirus was the most important without any scientist referrals. What is also interesting, at the same time, Amnesty International took the stand and said about coronavirus and human rights. So it was the saying just that you have to protect rights of health, well-being, access to healthcare, rights of being informed, and also freedoms from arbitrary detention, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and other economic, social rights and freedoms. So it can only be limited when it is necessity, be proportional and legal. So that was very interesting in the first meet on February. It was quite also reflected in Polish media. This is when we come to the break point. We have the UK, United Kingdom, which also was said by the ECDC in the 6th risk assessment on the 14th of February to join the group of countries which has the coronavirus patients. But in Poland, we enjoyed winter vacation. And this is exactly what I put on the map. You can see it. The biggest parts, the biggest regions had this vacation from 10th of February till 23 of February. And this is exactly the date when everything's changed in Polish media. And it started with the ECDC 7th risk assessment, which was referring to situation in Italy. And this is where I leave the presentation to Ursula.
Thank you, Mariusz. I will follow with the presentation. As you saw, Poland was pretty peaceful, I would say, with coronavirus for almost all of the February and January. Everything starts at the end of February, when the Italy started the lockdown in the country. So our media started to talk about what was going on in Italy. So on the 21st of February of 2020, the first media that started to talk about Italy was Deutsche Welle Polska, and started to describe how Italy fights coronavirus. So they said, of course, that Italy closed cities, that this is the first biggest epidemic outbreak in Europe, that during few days number of sick passed 100, and authorities isolate whole cities in Italy. Next, Mariusz, please. From this moment, from 24th of February, all eyes in Poland were on Italy. So all of our media started to talk about what is going on in Italy. How is the life in Italy during the pandemic? So they were talking about events cancelled, lack of protection mask, first red zones. They were also talking about numbers which are increasing very fast in Italy. So there were 11 other communities closed, 165 cases only in Lombardy. All of the tourist attractions were closed, Venice Festival was cut, mass events were cancelled and 6 people died, and very fast there were 206 people only on the north. Shops lacked wares, Italians start to make warlike shopping and protection mask profiteering start to be in Italy. So prices up from up to 1,700% of prices of masks, so from 10 cents to €1.80. This fear reached also Poland, so Italy was added to official advised not travel destination list. Okay, next. Some journalists started also ask questions. Why the epidemic in Italy start to be so fast? They spread so quickly. Because Italy was neither the first coronavirus country in Europe, nor the first COVID death country that already Claudio said. But Italy was the quickest and widest spreading country. They were very fast, 229 infected people and 7 deaths. On 22 of February of 2020, died 78 years old Adriano Trevisan, first Italian death after 10 days in hospital. Death with a few hours from first Italian cases reported. Within 24 hours, 11 communities in Lombardy and Veneto were isolated as red zones. Schools, offices, and other public places closed for a week. This is what our media started to report to Polish people. Next. How Polish officials react for this news from media? They said, stay calm. Coronavirus in Italy is under control. Returning tourists from Italy should remain calm. We have to remember that at the end of February, all of Polish winter vacation finished. So all of Italy is the most important direction for our winter holidays because of Alps. So a lot of Polish people, especially families with children, come back home from Italy. So our authorities said, don't worry, stay calm, you don't need a quarantine, you have to send your children to school. Everything is under control. Italy authorities will handle the problem. And coronavirus can be destroyed with reasonable and calm behavior, lack of panic, and self-responsibility. There is no cure, but 80% of infections are light. So what is advised? The hygiene. Clean hands, behave reasonably, and follow credible sources of information. So be aware with disinformation about the coronavirus. And they were also saying that there is no COVID-19 pandemic. The recent data show that the peak should end till the end of February. We're talking about what was going on more than 1 year ago. China releases restrictions. COVID-19 spread for 25 countries, including also Italy, Germany, France, and Finland, also United States, but only 26 people died, except China, of course. In China, we had the quickest spread of the coronavirus, and also in South Korea. 2 days, 1 day after, also our sanitary inspector give finally the advice not to travel to Italy. And from this moment, Italy became in Poland the country that we should avoid. Very fast reaction had insurances company in Poland. I don't know how it was in other countries, but in Poland, 25th of February, insurance business already react. So they said, don't worry, we will cover you. There is no official epidemics except of China. They started to send new offers for coronavirus coverage, including also traveling to Italy. So we can travel, but be secure with the insurance. As I said before, it was a period that winter vacation in Poland was over, but our government continuously saying, don't worry, everything is under control, suspected people are in hospitals, schools should work normally, but this was the advice of the government, but many schools didn't want to take children which were coming back from Italy. They didn't want to back them to school. They asked them to make a quarantine. Our sanitary inspector was saying that there are no excessive actions needed, that we don't need to do any quarantine, that everything is under control. So they were trying to convince us that there is no panic, we don't need to worry about anything, but of course people were reacting differently. And this situation was heavily reflected in all media in Poland. The same day, also they decided that airports should implement some special procedures from people returning from countries like China and also Italy. So they started to measure the temperature and so on. At the same day, finally, also they declared that there are a few more cases in Austria and Croatia that Ivana was talking about before already. And also they confirmed that all of those people came back from Italy. So we have still this Italian tragedy in progress in Poland. In the same day, we also could observe a lot of articles about what was going on in Italy. So there were some description about how is Milan, so that public transportation is empty because of the coronavirus, that companies are closed, that they are not working. They were making some interviews with Italians, which are describing the situation, saying that if Milan economy will collapse, also all of the Italy will collapse. So everything became much more emotional and much more tragic in our media in Poland. In the same period, also the famous match, zero match, was happened in Italy, but what is really interesting in Poland, about this event, they started to talk 1 month after the situation. We'll talk about this later. As I said before, our government was pretty easy, I would say, with all of the situation, and they didn't want to make special restrictions. So they said that the closure of schools is premature, so they didn't want to close schools at all. That kids should be allowed to go to schools, including the kids that were coming back from Italy from winter vacation. But of course, this is something that government was saying, but some of our schools, especially universities, react differently. So a lot of universities recalls work travels to countries with coronavirus cases, and Italy was included. I was one of the examples. I couldn't go for Erasmus to Italy, unfortunately, and I lost it already. And also they sent some information to exchange partners to recall invitations to Poland. So universities started to close by themselves very early. Finally, at the beginning of March, it was 4th of March, we had the news that we were expecting, because we knew that it will happen, the first coronavirus case in Poland. It was 4th of March, so it was really late comparing to different countries. Our health ministry gave this information during the press conference, and he said that all procedures work fine. Patient feels well and stay in hospital. It was the first positive test for 584 conducted so far. The patients were traveling by bus from Germany. He is in quarantine with other people which were traveling with him, which is really interesting. This patient is still the object of interest of media. After 1 year, he is kind of celebrity. They're still interesting. How is he doing? How he feels? We know his name, so his privacy is not important anymore. We know his age, we know how he felt at the moment, how he is feeling now. In this period, at the beginning of March, Polish media still comments on Italy. So we had a lot of information about concerning how it's possible that this pandemic was spreading so fast in Italy. So they're giving some examples like high average age and density for a square meter and so on. They started to also comment this zero match Spain with Italy. That was the reason that a lot of countries which are close start to have coronavirus as well. As you said, Ivana, also the first Croatian case came from this match. But some of other media started to defend Italy as well. So they said that Italy didn't have luck because it was the first a huge hit that took this country, and thanks to that, other countries could learn how to combat this virus. Thank you. And in the same period, the pandemic state was declared in Poland as well. And I will give the voice to Mariusz now to continue.
Oh, just quickly, because this is exactly the time when we found ourselves in the situation like Italy before, because 10th of March, Polish government started to limit public events. 11th of March, WHO declared COVID-19 pandemics. First infection has been confirmed, as Ursula has said, and that was quickly from then. Epidemic threat declared. Poland closed borders in the mid of March. 16th of March, there was the first Polish lockdown, and 20th of March, Polish Prime Minister declared epidemics, and since then, weekly restrictions, not every time logical, were raised and given again on the weekly government conferences. So the world for Poles has again changed. And what was interesting, at the same time, we also tried to find information about Italy. Of course, everything was also about Poland, government, how does it work, but the Italian connection was in our media reflected at the time. That was the Russia help for the Italians, and that was also interesting when how it changed with time, a very short time indeed. 22nd of March, that was the Russia declares help to Italy, and that was an information cited via the Polish press agency. The same 22 of March, there was a commentary saying that it will influence sanctions against Russia, and the sanctions against Russia with connection to the European isolation in the context of invasion on Ukraine will be a victim of coronavirus. That was the commentary, the first commentary in ONET, which is part of this Axel Springer media. And the 24th of March, there was Euractiv saying that the Russia medical aid to Italy was indeed military planes who bought equipment and tests with around 100 specialists. Boxes were labeled "Greetings from Moscow." This is what Polish people had been by Euractiv said. But 2 days later, there was first large article saying that the Russian aid is heavily suspected because the doctors sent to Italy are of military origin, mayors, colonels, and generals who battled in Africa and Middle East. And Italians ask, is it an aid or a raid? And this is exactly 1 day later, so it took 1 week, the development and the change of the news, when it was said in a large Polish newspaper that 80% of Russian aid for Italy is useless. That was based on the Moscow Times, who cited La Stampa. And that's the end of the story about the aid. Sad is that the European aid started in 6th of April. It was noted in Polish papers, and 7th of April, Polish aid started to be sent to Italy. Conclusions. Polish narratives were at first based on international media coverage, mostly German, which followed ECDC updates. First cases were reported in line with ECDC official timelines. They were referring to China and no risk for Poland, of course. Government sources called people comparing COVID-19 to flu till early March, including winter vacation returns from Italy. 23rd of February changed the narration. Italy started to be seen as the first European country when the virus accelerated to epidemics. And then Italy became the center of the news, as we've shown. Italians were shown as the first battlefield to learn, but Poles started the practical lessons nearly a month later. Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your intervention. Also, always rich in information and with many points of view. I see connected Francesca Cubeddu, research fellow at Roma 3, who has done a nice research on the consequences of COVID and housing tragedy. I say hello, and now the word to Slovenia. Correct me if I don't say correct the name. Uroš Pinterić, from Alexander Dubček, voilà, University in Trenčín, Slovakia.
Thank you very much. That's probably one of the better pronunciation of my name in the international academic community. So, Nicola, thank you for this one. Yes, thank you for the invitation. Maybe just a brief explanation. I do live in Slovenia, but my work is at Alexander Dubček University in Trenčín in Slovakia. Obviously, academic community has some specific logic, I would say, sometimes about the employments and similar things. So anyway, getting to topic of Slovenia and dealing with the coronavirus, I would say that Slovenia is one of specific cases where media has big problem, which is not really connected with themselves, but it's mainly connected with what's going on around. So first reports on something going on in China were obviously provided already in early January 2020. It was the general reporting. There is some kind of virus which creates pneumonia-like illness, and it spreads rather fast. But for now, this is the Chinese issue. We are monitoring the situation. Don't panic. That was obviously the first impression. And as the time passes, Slovenian media were mainly following the international press associations, press houses, and were regularly updating this information with the increase of information in late January 2020. So within, let's say, 3 weeks from don't panic, it's far away, the stories change to it's going around the world, we are monitoring the situation, we need to be careful. Government at that point was obviously also promoting this idea. But what happens in February? There are two things. One is pretty much, let's say, natural. And the natural part of this is that Slovenia has the winter holidays divided in two parts between the eastern and western part of the country. But this happens somewhere between 15th of February and end of February, sometimes early March. Anyway, this is the holiday period. And obviously, we knew at that time already that things are getting worse already, not only in China, but around the world and especially in Europe. Despite all of this, there was in the media, they just presented the theoretical debate on what is going on, which was supported by the information from the National Institute of Public Health, which took first positions, answers first questions, how Slovenia is prepared on the situation, and what is the plan. Anyway, in mid-February in Slovenia happened something else. Left-center government declared that it's resigning. So quite out of blue, the government, led at that time by Marjan Šarec, declared its resignation. It was not in the first opinion connected in one way or another to the pandemic, but it will strongly influence what happens afterwards. Slovenia started to test the people towards the coronavirus in second half of February, when people started to return from different holiday locations abroad. So Italy was on the list, Austria was on the list, Germany was on the list, also some other countries, even a bit more, how to say, tropical or exotic ones, until to the point that on 4th of March, we finally, after approximately a few dozens of tests, we confirmed the first positive case on 4th of March 2020, coming from holidays in the ski resort in Italy, and it was medical doctor. So this was one of the things which was in the very early phase kind of mocked by the public, because the information was made available by media, that yes, sure, doctors brought it because they are the only one who had enough money to go for the winter holidays abroad. So this was one of the aspects which was seen as a subtone to the reporting and how the people should see the thing. It's something that the elite class of the people would bring into the country, because, you know, the working population is not going anywhere. This will be quite important also after the first wave of the pandemics, when in June 2020, the general population started with the vacation in Croatia, and it was connected with perception on which countries are dangerous, which countries are potential, how to say, hosting countries for the virus, and where we will get the second wave out of. This being truth or not, it is potentially discussable. Decide that the numbers show that yes, during the summer period that there was increased amount of people who brought the virus from the holidays in Croatia, but there is another thing which is rather relevant, why certain things happened in the way, mostly around the Europe because of the economic reasons, but also in Slovenia because of our perception of the situation. I need to go now step or two back into the time around the beginning of the coronavirus. So what happened, as I said, media initially showed it's far away, then yes, it's here, and it's just the question when we get it. When we actually got it, the main issue was that Slovenian government or Slovenian political system was in the transition from one government to another. And it was not the proper, let's say, electoral transition, which would be at least predictable, but it was, as I said, some kind of abrupt change of the government. And since the mid of February, Slovenian politics, which was at the end of the day responsible for the measures, was mainly dealing with finding new proportions in the parliament, which would allow the new government without early election. And media were also paying more attention to this than actually what's going on with the coronavirus, as well as public. Those of people who were following the situation a bit better in the medical sense, they started to make big business out of the face masks. Despite the early recommendation of Slovenian National Health Institute, which was disseminated through the mass media, was that face masks do not help, they are not needed, they are unimportant, they are just, you know, kind of show off without the effect. Obviously, this thing changes in few weeks. And one of the things which was shown through the development of the pandemics and reaction of media was that media was mainly not asking the questions, but was following the information from the sources which should be considered reliable, either by the government sources or the health authorities. The problem which emerged was that health authorities, as well as government, were dealing with the pandemics and still are dealing with the pandemics in Slovenia in the fashion of daily political needs. So this is one of the things which caused, very honestly, possibly around 3,000 or more deaths due to the COVID-19 in Slovenia, which would be preventable with proper measures being installed in time during the second wave. So from the first case in 4th of March, the government which is leaving in a few days, so on 7th of March, they limits the gathering to less than 500 people. So in 3 days, no more gatherings for more than 500 people. 2 days later, 9th of March, public gatherings are further limited to smallest groups possible, including the schools. So effectively, on 9th of March, the government which is leaving the office limits the education system, because obviously this is one of the uncontrolled, rather big gatherings, which is systematic and as such seen as a threat for the potential spread of infection. 10th of March, partial closure of the borders for the risky destinations, including, and in first place especially, Italy and Austria in the second place. 12th of March, epidemics in Slovenia is declared. So when we had, before the first case, media as well as government and everybody else was rather relaxed, and yes, we are prepared and we will do something if necessary. But when the first case emerged, within few days actually epidemics was declared, and all the limitations, including the ban of the schools, ban of the travel, was made effective. So this was 12th of March. On 13th of March, there is a new government. So the basic limitation or basic stop within the country or basic big lockdown was done still by the previous government. And now we have the new government, which is led by the prime minister, which was in independence war for Slovenia in 91, acting as a minister of defense, so he should have some kind of crisis management skills, to say so. And what happens then in daily routine? We are getting new measures, we are getting new rules, until to the point that on 19th of March, we get the most important message, which was systematically promoted, not only in Slovenia, but in general in Europe, together we can. That was the first message of unity, which was given, at least in Slovenian media, launched by the Slovenian government and medical professionals, that we can stop the pandemics only if we work together by social distancing, by respecting the rules, and so on. 4 days later, so we are still in 23rd of March, now the government cancels the crisis management team. So our numbers are going up, but the government cancels the crisis management team and assumes that the whole government is working under the crisis condition. So this is probably kind of comparable with understanding that war will go on for some time and we cannot dismanage as a short-time crisis. It appoints the governmental speaker for the COVID affairs, and since that time we have the daily briefings, even twice per day, regarding the situation of COVID in Slovenia. In 2 days, so 25th of March, medical experts, which were before denying the usefulness of wearing the face masks, are now recommending to wear the face mask. Still, this is not mandatory. It's only the recommendation. On 30th of March, we have the total lockdown with people not being able to move outside of their municipality. We have mandatory face masks now, and this is then the first total lockdown. What happens actually here, question of how the media behaves. Media is excluded from the communication by the rules of no public gatherings, and since the media briefings were declared as public gatherings, the new government says that journalists shouldn't be present in person at the briefings, so they were unable to effectively ask the questions. So government was only, or governmental offices were only collecting the questions from the journalists, and they were selecting those that they wanted to answer. And in this perspective, for approximately next 2 months, we have some kind of question of reliability of information that is disseminated by the media. So we are not 100% sure if media are doing their job as a fourth branch of the government, so controlling what's going on, or they're just used as a promotion machine for the government opinions. Then we have the whole April until at the end of the April, the movement restriction is lifted. So it means that we can move around the country again freely. And the next days, obviously, other restrictions are slowly lifted. Due to the thing that somebody wrote, I'm not going to name the person because I'm not 100% sure, but somebody wrote it in the chat that there is a question for the lawyers about the human rights. Exactly because of this, Slovenian public started to protest, started with demonstrations, which are going on actually all the way until today. So practically every Friday in Slovenia, there is a smaller or bigger demonstration against the government, against the measures, against some specific issue, or against the situation in general. On the other hand, obviously, police is trying to monitor the situation, sometimes more effectively, sometimes less effectively. What happens in this situation is that, for instance, I'm a bit jumping in the time. On 30th of June, Slovenian Minister of Interior, which would be minister responsible for police forces, resigns because he disagrees with some medical suggestions, and partially resigns because he's under the investigation due to the medical equipment business, which was done in March. Yeah, Prime Minister accepts his resignation, but asks him to stay few days more. And these few days more means that the same person is still the prime minister today. And then we have lots of bans on, as I said, ban of the movement, ban of ability to join the family, and so on, which was later challenged by at the Constitutional Court. And Constitutional Court over the last year and few months, obviously, managed to declare lots of the measures which were taken by this government unconstitutional, or at least the form in which those measures were taken was declared unconstitutional, because they were ignoring the parliament, for instance, as a legislative body. So they were, in some aspects, they were ruling by decrees. So it was kind of wartime ruling, and in the same picture was obviously copied also towards the relation of media. So the problem of media in this perspective, not to go too far away from the major topic, is that they were proven to be without the backbone. Slovenian media didn't play the role of somebody who would keep the government accountable towards the public. They became actually just very confused, how to say, propagator, which was at the same time in a very unlucky position, because the government and the medical experts were reporting sometimes within the same day different information. So, for instance, you have the situation when one day Minister of Interior says we are not changing the system of passing the borders, and the next press conference, which was in the afternoon, the government spokesperson for the COVID says we are liberating the system for passing the borders. Then the media were reporting things like government accepted the special traffic lamp, so the system of colors, for declaring and then easing the measures in the respect to the epidemics. And everybody understood, okay, we have measures, we have numbers, we can check. When we are at a certain point, we will change the system. So according, just not to go too much in the history, but to the recent times, Slovenian rule was that we are declared to be green when we will have 7-day average 300 new infections. We reached this. Now we are at 160, let's say, approximately. New infections average for 7 days. And the government says that it doesn't matter, because we will declare ourselves green only at the time when we will reach the European green level. which is 40 average, I think 40 new infections per week or something like this per 100,000 people. Yeah, so this needs to be so. And with all these, the media passage being unlike because they are obviously just following the government and expert reports. But if we understand that science can not really agree with itself because of new discovery regarding the COVID, understanding the illness better, and so on and so on, the non-consistency of the politics made media extremely unreliable. So when we try to figure out what will really happen is pretty much the similar way like going to the fortune teller, yeah. And this is approximately how we judge not only the media but the whole institutional systems of the country at the moment in order to keep the sanity. So even if we understand what is good for us, what is bad for us, we do it on the personal level. And from this perspective, we can see the same thing. The same thing with the question of vaccinations. Yeah? So we see what is going on with AstraZeneca. We get mainly media reports on this. From media we consider to be reliable within the countries. We got the same from same information from medical experts, that there is potentially something that we need to be careful about, but the politics says this is better than nothing. On the other hand, if everything is better than nothing, lack of introduction of other vaccines like Sputnik at the moment, it becomes actually the political topic and not the medical solution to the problem. And this was already partially mentioned by the colleague before, that how we assess help of Russia to Italy, which was, yes, possibly espionage in order to understand illness better before the Russia was actually strongly hit by it. Yeah? So military medical experts were able to predict what is going on, what will be going on in Russia, but still they provided something. Yeah, and the same thing happens in many other situations. So in this perspective, through support of media, but mainly because of the political decisions, COVID became, from the medical crisis, actually somehow geopolitical and, let's say, international political issue, which will be not only ruling our health, but also our economies and political decisions in near future. So I'm sorry that I took this focus from media a bit broader, but I think that it is kind of important to see what happens in a big pictures, not only in this small tragedy, which is almost 4 million or around 4 million deaths and many more millions of ill people who are struggling or were struggling with this. Thank you for the attention.
No, thank you to Uroš, because the situation, remember the question, the relation between the central government and the government of the region. In Italy, there was this problem, not with the measure, but with the government of the region. Thank to Uroš and the speaker before him. We have not now so many time because I anticipate I have to run to exam at 4:20, but I first, if there is some question of the public, but from the public I saw the legal question posed by Guglielmo. So I launch this challenge to Guglielmo. Don't hate me, Guglielmo, but because Uroš talk about geopolitical topic and about legal topic, So I invite, it's only improvisation, but I invite to Guglielmo in 3 minutes to launch the conclusion of this relation. Guglielmo, would you like try that?
Oh, it's a great honor, but the conclusion, I think that is Claudio Melchior can make for us in a best way.
Okay, but please, your.
I read my words for us jurists. The COVID problem is the introduction of an exception to the fundamental constitutional freedoms, movement, assembly, and the introduction of an exception regime that we do not know when it ends. An increase in the spread of the virus, but how much compared to what is enough to increase the powers of the government again. Also, with the postponement of the election or with the extension in office of government posts. The problem is that is not to know when this period will end, and everything is left to the decision of the government and its experts. Is a problem of fundamental constitutional freedoms for us. But I think that the same problem is regard the other matter like sociology, communication, and other things. Thank you.
No, thank you, Guglielmo. I suppose the best thing, if you wanted, I can send a mail with our whole contact, Guglielmo, Manuela Farinosi, why not? So we can build a net about that. So only for the time reason, because all people, all relator was very, very interesting, but because this event has two organization, one organizer, one me and one Claudio, I leave for the last minutes, or if you want more, because I have an exam in other session at 4:30, in oversight. Claudio, if you are close in 1 minute.
In 1 minute? Well,
yes.
It's impossible. Okay, the role of Italy in spreading the virus was very clear in the representation of our colleagues from many countries, so it was something that was shared in all Europe. I've already told you about my ideas about this fact that, in my opinion, is not so linked to reality, and we have to think from a global and world point of view to this kind of news and media. I think that it's important to think about the differences of the narratives that we have seen, because in the differences are the logical nodes of our possibility to widen our knowledge about the phenomenon and our knowledge about the way in which media represent the phenomenon in our countries. And probably the best thing that we can do in order to understand always better this kind of things and so many other things is to link together our experience with the experience of other people from other countries, because if you look one thing from different points of view, you can find a lot of occasions to to better the way in which we understand reality and media, and so the outgoing of our societies. So I think it has been very interesting for me, for sure, this meeting, and I hope that in the future we'll have the possibility to work again together. And naturally, yes, we have absolutely to share our contacts in order to keep in touch for the future.
Thank you, and apologize to me, but we are late. We wrote 2:30 until 4 o'clock, and the time is very running fast because maybe this topic for all us were very, very interesting. I say hello to everybody, and yes, as I said, Claudio, keep in contact. Touching contact, so we can write in the future maybe with a publication about this topic, because now in this moment we are building a very international net. Thank you all, everybody.